Tope, should we give a couple minutes, just let people come in? Maybe like 5 minutes?
Oh, yes, yes.
Oh,
That's in order.
okay.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Um, I guess before others join in, if we could, I want to get a sense of like my audience. I have an idea of like the group in Express, so that I can kind of like tailor my explanations towards um like for it to make sense for you. So I don't know, is anyone here like working as a business analyst now, or like with exams? You can just put in the chat. You don't have to, or if you want to come off mute, that's fine as well. But just want to have an idea of like, the phase you're at so that I can better I know how much detail or like things I could like skim over and stuff like that. Is there no one wants to say? I would also encourage us. I know a lot of people don't, yeah, usually don't like to, you know, speak or talk during these types of sessions, but I would encourage us to show some enthusiasm, so to speak, just so we can have like a collaborative session, interactive session. I feel as though you would get the most out of it, like if you participate. But yeah. But just okay, by a show of hands, is there anyone here like is looking to write the exams, any of the IIBA exams, CBAB, CCBA, any exams? Do we have any exam takers in the room? Okay, I'm getting responses. Thank you for your responses. Okay. Okay, I see two people prepping for CBAB. Okay, that's good. Mm, okay. So we definitely have exam takers in the house. So Um, all right. I will also like um specify on like things that you could likely that could come out, or like just to better understand this technique. Okay, another person for CBAB. Mm, okay. That's a good start. Yeah, so we'll just give it like for 2 more minutes or no. Anyways, Tope, let me know when I should start. I'm here for you. I'm at your disposal, whatever
All
you
right.
need.
So I think in about 2 minutes time, we can just start. That will be
Okay.
by 20:35, 8:35.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just no worries. Just angle. Yeah. Okay. If you see me looking off the screen, it's because like the controls for Teams is on my other screen. So the screen that has the slides is here. So that's why you might see me like looking off camera. I'm looking at my second screen so that I don't miss any comments, or like if someone has their hands up and stuff. I have that on the side. So. Mhm. Okay. I guess I could just start with my own introduction. Just so at least you know who is speaking to you. So my name is Seno Obasi. I'm a product manager. I work in I work for Totality. It's a real estate enterprise, I guess you can call it that. It's a corporation that has like a bunch of different business units under that. And I work for the real estate section. So they have like other other business units under that, such as like mortgage insurance, all of that. But I'm in the real estate side, and I work for, or the product I'm under, it's a real estate portal. So similar to like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with like Zillow or like Realtor.com, or like any of those like um sites that you use to like search for stuff, for listings. So yeah, that's kind of like what I do. We build the kind of portal that provides um listings, like we service MLSs, so like multiple listing services, to display their data on our portal. It's an agent invite only portal, so you couldn't like randomly search for it and find it if you were not invited into it. So I'm a product manager for that. So like build products to support agents and home buyers to kind of like help them collaborate in the works. So yeah, I've been working here for the past uh almost 5 years now, I believe. I'm also I did the session with Raise through Top. I don't know if any of you went through the Raise school, or like, or what would I call it now? The organization like to prep for CBAB. So yeah, I wrote my CBAB like about 5 years ago as well. So yeah, that's I guess in the summary, in a nutshell, that is me. And I recently just did got my certification in product management. So yeah, so that is my little bio. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers all of that. I started here, I used to be a product analyst, and I got moved up to become a product manager for the same company. So yeah, so today I'm here to guide us through the technique business rules analysis. So at any point during this session, feel free to stop me if you have questions. We will have a dedicated time at the end though for like Q&A. So if you don't want to like interrupt during, you can simply let me know at any point like at the end, or like leave questions in the chat, and we will get to it. But yeah, other than that, that is pretty much that for now. Yep. Hi, Christy. So let us proceed. And marker. So the agenda for today, just so you have an idea and kind of know what's in store. What we're gonna cover, first of all, we're gonna just do a bit of introduction and the understanding the business rules analysis as it relates to the Babok, because obviously everything we do is based on the Babok version 3. So the information I'll be sharing is based on that. And as well, I would also like let you know, like, we will compare with like real life experiences. Sometimes it's not always like clean cuts, but everything will be studying here will be based on the Babok. So you kind of like in practice, you kind of like you mix and match. But for the purpose of this class and the technique we're studying today, we're going to be following the Babok like strictly. So yeah, so we understand the context, like where business rules analysis play a role, like at what point we use it within the Babel context. We'll go over the types of business rules versus requirements. So this is also a part where a lot of people tend to get confused between rules and requirements, and sometimes if you do not understand like the clear demarcation and borders of where the rule stops and where the requirement begins, it could lead to like issues within your product and the bigger picture as a whole. Then we'll go over elicitation, like how do you elicit these business rules, the analysis of it, how you analyze it, and also lastly, how you document these rules once it's done. The tools we use to like map out the business rules. So we'll go over decision tables as well as decision trees, and then have a little case study that I would share with you. You can, like, in your own free time, you can go over it, kind of like help you to build on the knowledge you learn here. And like I find that when you do, it kind of like sticks more. So I would urge everyone with that case study to at your leisure, just kind of like go over it and try to work out the questions and like the problems posed there. And then just a little knowledge check just to be sure that we actually understood what was said. Okay. So by the end of this, just like I said with the agenda that you've seen, at the end of this, you should be able to articulate the purpose of the business rules analysis and also its scope within the Babok Vision 3. You should be able to describe or understand why organizations use business rules to drive consistency. You should also be able to identify key differences and know when rules or requirements applies. Like I was saying earlier, difference between rules and requirements. So at the end of this class, you should be able to distinguish the two. And lastly, at the end of this, you should have an idea of how decision tables and decision trees are built and used to express um, logic or like rules that will govern a business. Okay, before we go in, any questions based on the agenda, like the flow of how the class is going to be today? No? Okay. All right. So let's dig in. So let's first understand it within the Babok context because like as I'm sure all of us here know, like the Babok could be a little bit daunting depending on how you're tackling it. And sometimes you see like a bunch of techniques and you're not really sure exactly where this fits in or how it fits in or how it relates to like a job or something you're trying to do. So first of all, let's understand that business rules analysis is a core Babok technique, and it's used to identify, express, validate, refine, and manage rules over time. So it ensures that the business behavior is explicitly defined and consistently applied. So it is a rule, right? And rules are made to govern um, they're meant to govern and kind of like give people an idea or structure of how a business entity should run and what is expected. The rules take away a lot of ambiguity and just this is what it is and this is how things should be done. So that is kind of what this is all about. And the knowledge areas that support this technique are like or like where you would implement it, if you will. One, you do that in your requirements analysis and design definition. So the rules help to inform the solution design as well as the acceptance criteria that would follow, that will come from that. You use it when you're doing your business analysis, planning and monitoring. So the rule governance informs the planning activities as well as the stakeholder engagement. So whatever kind of rules you have that um, while you're doing your business planning, business analysis planning, the knowledge of the business rules can like help govern how that particular activity or task would be performed. And then lastly, within your solution evaluation, the rules validate whether a solution behaves as intended. So most times you will be validating your solution based on a rule that the business has set from the start. So once you're done with solution, you now have to go back and check and say, okay, what was it the business wanted? Is the solution delivering this specific requirements essentially? So as we go further down, you would get to see how like they relate and how you can use the roles to validate your solutions. So if there's anything you should take away from this in terms of like the definition of the business rule analysis, just remember these four terms. So I have highlighted them here. First, you identify. So you need to be able to surface rules from your stakeholders and different sources because we would see later that our rules can come from anywhere. There are a number of places where rules can be from. So either the stakeholders as well as from different sources. We would also have a look at that as we go further. Secondly, expression. So you need to be able to state your roles clearly and unambiguously. So whatever roles we come up with, they need to be devoid of ambiguity. They need to be easily understandable by anyone who is reading them. The intent should be clear from the jump. The third thing to remember is validate. Whatever you are doing when you're trying to document your rules, validation is non-negotiable. So after you have collected your or like sourced your roles or identified these roles from the business, you have to also now validate because once you've done your you've mapped out and documented the roles, you have to then go back to the business and ensure that okay, all of these things that you have documented is exactly what the business intended, and this is like you have the permission to go forward. And then lastly, we manage. So we collect the rules, we keep it, we implement it for whatever endeavor we're on. However, the rules get stale over time, or we might have like new rules or like new features being implemented that might conflict with an existing rule. So this is where the maintain and governance of those rules come into play, because you have to make sure that at every given point, it is relevant and it is true. The original intent and the meaning behind the rules must never change. So we'll also see later on we also have to have ownership for these roles, because any role without an owner is just kind of like going to go still, go like it becomes it goes into a black hole that's it leads to problems. It leads to unending problems. Like so, long story short, it needs to be managed. So let's just take that. Um, so let's begin. What is a business role? In simple terms, it's a statement that defines or constrains. So this two very important, defines or constrains some aspect of a business. And it is owned by the business, not the solution. So that's like something you can always like just have behind your mind when you hear business roles. Your mind should automatically go away from solution and just be thinking more from a business side. Like, what is it that the business wants? Forget about how it will be implemented. We focus on the business because the rules come from the business. It's going to be always be owned by the business. The solution has no control over what the rules are. It's the job of the solution is just to implement and enforce the rules that are set by the business. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. You said like customers must be at least 18 years old to apply. So you can see it's a statement is definitive and it's very clear. So it could have been, they could have said, someone could have said, oh, customers must be an adult to apply. But then that opens up that statement to a lot of debates and conversation. It's not clear enough because who defines who an adult is? There are some countries that will tell you at 18 you're an adult, some will say 21. So it's opens up, it's ambiguous. So that's like one of the things that we'll see further down. One of the key things about role, it has to be very clear. So this is a really good example of a business role, must be at least 18. So a specific objective age has been put there, and that's kind of like justifies and helps the role to be stable and be able to be used across multiple in multiple different instances by anybody, because it's a role, it's right there, it's not ambiguous, nobody can interpret it in a different way, it is what it is. Another one, claims over 10,000 require manager approval. So it could have been claims, um large claims, like that could have, like sometimes you'll see something like that. That again like opens it up to different interpretations. Who defines what large is? What is large? Could it be 1,000, maybe 100,000? So being very specific and clearly highlighting, like making the rule very atomic is very important in understanding the business rules. And last one, orders over $100 receive free shipping. So these are basic rules. You can see they are definitive statements. They're not non-ambiguous, very clear. It's not open to multiple interpretations. It is just exactly as it is at face value. So business rules exist independently of any system and process, and they reflect how organizations choose to operate. So like I said, completely independent of the solution. It is strictly based on the business. So why do they matter? Why do business rules matter? A couple of reasons. One, regulatory compliance. This is gold because in anything you're doing, the regulatory aspects of products or like just general any any business you're doing always comes first because most in civilized places and within a working business unit, you must always comply with regulatory rules or obligations. So one very important reason why business rules are there is to ensure that the operation meets legal and industry requirements. So depending on the industry, they might have their own like bodies that have their own set of rules that you have to follow. So whenever a business is trying to, map out their rules, the first thing you will be doing is to first get out all the regulatory compliance items and kind of like make those one standard because most times any default of regulatory or legal um, roles usually have high penalties that businesses do not want to incur. Like you could open yourself up to lawsuits or fines. That's just like for what reason. So very important to always take note of the regulatory compliance. Secondly, operational consistency. So like I had mentioned earlier as well, um, regardless of who is operating the system, those rules in place ensure that the work is consistent. I'll give you an example. Let's use like a retail store, right? They might have rules for like discount on certain goods, and we know how retail stores work. 1,000,001 people work there. People come in. Some people are part-time contract staff, whatever. You do not expect them to remember or know all the rules that apply to the 1,000,001 products that they have in store. So these business rules in that kind of situation, for instance, if you say, okay, like maybe items that are about to expire, like have like 2 weeks expiry or a week, depending on whatever you set, they receive a 10% discount. So something like that, once that rule is imputed into the system, it's consistent. So it doesn't matter who is behind the counter, who is doing checkout. The rule is there and it's going to be applied to everyone and it remains consistent. So that is why business rules matter. This number two reason. Thirdly, it reduces the risk. So um, explicit rules minimize costly errors and exceptions. I kind of like touched on this a little bit when I spoke about the regulatory compliance and defaulting. So it can be very expensive having errors just because a rule was not in place or people did not know what to do and people are just kind of like vibing based on their own whatever it is that they felt they wanted to do. So yeah. Fourthly, we have better decisions. So the rules help encode institutional knowledge faster, accurate, and also to make accurate decisions. So whenever there's a rule in place, because it's going to be very well clearly outlined, when you want to make a decision, it's so much easier because you can see everything like mapped out and at a glance. So it helps in decision making. And then lastly, we have process automation. Once you define uh, a rule, like once you have a business rule in place, especially in cases where you have a sequential logic, like every sequence of events, once you're able to map it out correctly, you're able to automate the process. So it would eliminate the need for a human in the loop, so to speak. Because now it's this the system understands. So even without any intervention from a personnel, the automation can go on smoothly for a specific type of task that you have like predetermined based on the business rules that you have set in place. So does that make sense? Okay, someone's there. Can I clarify difference between rules and requirements? Yes, very good question. Christy, we will get to that. I have a slide just for that with examples, so you would be able to see it clearly. But that's really good because it is one of the pitfalls that a lot of people fall into, kind of like confusing a rule with a requirement. So, okay. Any questions so far? After the one Chrissy has asked, so we're going to touch on that. But for now, any other? No? Okay. All right. So next I want to touch on the sources of business rules. So before we even start analyzing and knowing how to map these business rules, we know what business rules are now. We have defined it. So now we want to know where are we going to get these rules from? So what are the sources? The sources can be broken down into two, internal and external. Already from the term, you can kind of have an idea, okay, internal is going to come within the business itself. So the first place you can get it from, policies and procedures. Usually every business kind of like has like operational guidelines that they follow. So when you want to create or come up with your business rules, you go through all those policies and procedures that govern the business and kind of like filter out or like highlight all of the rules that govern the business because now you want to like take it out and actually document it properly. Second place you can get it from an internal source is strategy documents or that's based on the organizational goals and the directive. So what is it that the business wants? Where are they going? What is the strategy of the business? And then thirdly, from the business stakeholders, so your SMEs and subject matter experts, they're a good source of business rules. Okay. Sorry, just turn that off. Excuse me. Secondly, we have external sources. So this, again, as the name implies, is external. So outside of the business, what are the things or the factors that can affect the business and could be a source of a business rule? Excuse me. So one, government regulations. I already said it's one of the most important. Like you have to be abreast with the regulations that govern the industry you're in. Because with the business rule, you have to make sure that the laws are and any other like rules that govern that particular business unit we are compliant. Like there is no business that would be running without being compliant to the laws of that particular industry or state where it's operating. So government regulations, the source of external sources, to industry standards, so sector specific framework. So like within real estate, here we have a lot. Like so many different regulations. Like we get a lot from like we're getting from Korea. We have based on like a Reso DD type regulations for like how listings should be displayed in terms of like what the names are like. You would think that oh people just kind of like they want to list their house for sale, they can just like call whatever field anything that they just kind of dream about. But there are actually standards that you have to follow. There are certain terms, there are certain ways that these fields must be displayed. There are certain things. So like sometimes like compensation, like your realtor compensation, there are certain disclosures that you should or should not include. So all of those kind of things. Every industry has peculiarities and nuances that are specific to that industry. So understanding what the industry you're in demands is a very good source for your business rules. And then lastly, your contracts and legal. So most times you most likely working with third-party vendors or even just within you might have like contracts that your business is kind of like obligated to because like once the contract is involved, you know that there are obligations and there are constraints. So it doesn't matter what your vision for your product or like whatever it is you're trying to do is, if you don't have if you are not making sure that you're adhering to legal contracts, official contracts that have been signed, then you're going to fall into trouble. So the external source getting your all the contracts and legal peculiarities pertaining to that business is a very, very good source for business rules. So ultimately, you want to be able to trace every role that you come up with. It needs to be traceable. You need to be able to trace it back to its origin. So we trace it back for validation and also for change management. So if at any point in time there is a change, you have to know where did the role even originate from before you can even think about how you can go about changing it. So that these are the sources. Any questions over here? Okay. Okay, so next, types of business rules. The first one we have is operative roles. So this is direct behavior and action. Some, but I think you would see it called behavioral roles, right? It's because this involves like direct behavior and actions. So it depends a lot on an actual person performing an act. So a good example here would be like say employees must submit expenses within 30 days. However, like this type of roles, though, they are because when they're behavioral, they're subject to being broken or like being misapplied, right? We'll see a little bit more on that. But because it's your is based, it's a little bit subjective because it says like, it's an act that a user has to perform for that rule to be in place. So those are operative roles. Then structural roles, these ones describe facts and relationship between entities. So usually the structural roles are very like rigid. Um, they're non-compromising, like this is the role. It's not subjective. It's, for example, it's every order must belong to one customer. So you can never have this is in a situation of an e-commerce, let's say, or even a regular retail store saying every order must belong to one customer. So there's no way you would have an order that was not tied to a customer because how did that happen? It's not possible. So that's like a clear example of a structural rule. We have decision rules, and these ones, they support conditional decision making. So it's always like if something happens, then it helps you make a decision. So an example here, if a credit score is less than 600, you should reject that person's application. So that's kind of like it helps you make decisions based on predetermined criteria. And then lastly, regulatory roles, like we said, governed by legislation or external mandates. So an example here would be customer data must be retained for 7 years. Most companies have this type of like legal requirements for sensitive data. There's usually a prescribed um, time frame where you can have or retain data for individuals. Like if you collect people's age, birthday, blah, 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 all of that, usually there's like a constraint, depending on the type of industry, for like how long you have to retain certain information, or even like hospital records and those kinds of things. So that is an example of a regulatory rule. So here now, we're going to get to Christie's question, rules versus requirements. How do you differentiate them? So this table is actually very easy for you to kind of like see side by side and understand it. So let's go one after the other. The first one we have defines policy or constraint. That's a rule. So if you remember our definition, it's something that's going to govern a business, right? So it's about the business. So it's defining the policy or the constraints that would govern that business or how the business should operate. While a requirement is defining a system capability, right? Okay, I'll take each one and then show you to go through the example. So the practical example we will use here, again, I use commerce because it's kind of like easy for a lot of people to understand. Because we kind of like at some points in our daily lives we encounter it, so it's easy to relate the terms in that fashion. So customers with balances overdue by 60 days cannot place new orders. So this is the rule the business has come up with. So that is a rule. And if you remember, we said it has to be a statement, it has to be unambiguous and like explicit. So anyone reading this, customers with balances overdue by 60 days cannot place new orders. there is nothing to debate. Everything that you need to know is within that sentence. So now we had said earlier that requirements are how we enforce. If we think of requirements as like the rule enforcers, right? Okay, so the business has this rule that they want. They don't want any customers that have more than 60-day overdue balance to be able to place new orders. Like, you don't do, you have tried, and don't order anymore, don't place any new orders. But then how do you ensure that that doesn't happen? The system, that's where you now build the requirement that ensures that the system will, you know, puts a gate to kind of like stop that action. So what would the requirement be in this case? It will be the system shall block order submission when an overdue balance exceeds 60 days. So you can see like um they're kind of like yin yang. It complements, it's like two pieces that complement each other to fulfill one particular task. So the rule here clearly defines what the business wants, while the requirements defines how the solution would enforce it. So, well, the first point there was it defines the policy, that's for the rule now, defining policy or constraint. And we can see with this example, the business has told you our policy is that anyone with 60 days overdue balance cannot place an order. That's the constraint that the business has put on ground. And now the requirements is for us to define the system capability. Now we've said the system shall block any order submission when an overdue balance exceeds 60 days. So you can see like directly how one is a policy or constraint, and then the second one is defining a system capability. What can the system do? How do they enforce that? The second difference between these two, one I've been saying from the jump, the business rule is owned by the business. The business is responsible for the rules, while the requirements is solution driven. So again, this kind of like helps put in perspective. From the example, we saw that the business has told us they don't want people over 60 days balance overdue to be able to place anything, while the solution now, the requirements, which is the solution, is now putting within the system a block that completely disallows anyone who has any kind of 60-day overdue balance to be able to do anything. See that? The third difference between the two is that the rule exists independently of the systems. We don't, the business has no idea what the solution is even going to do with is completely different. Like the solution could have decided to implement the rule or like enforce the rule in a number of ways. It could be like they could have even said, okay, like instead of just even like blocking from them to order, they might put or create another solution that could require them to um maybe they have to like maybe have like you have to make like payments or um I can't think of something right now, but you get the gist. There could be multiple solutions to enforce one particular role. So understanding that the role exists independently of the solution is one major difference and kind of like helps put things in perspective. So the role exists independently while the requirement supports the implementation. And then the last one is relatively stable. When a business, like every business has, they know like what their MO is going to be. They know how they intend to make money. They know how they plan to kind of like keep things orderly, organized, and just making sure that the business is profitable. So very unlikely does the rule needed to govern a business change unless if there's like a major change either from external factors or like something like within, maybe the business changes or like the business model wants to change or something like that. Otherwise, it is relatively stable. However, the requirements can change. So this kind of ties back into what I was saying about there being potentially different kinds of ways to implement a solution. One rule can have multiple ways to enforce. So that's why it's likely to change. So it's possible that you come up with the rule, you go, okay, go meet your developers, let them start implementing this rule. However, as they start going down one solution path, maybe due to technology constraints or like it could be a number of things that could prevent them from going down one solution path, then they have to pivot and find another way to enforce the rule. However, the rule never changes, the rule remains the same, it remains stable. However, the implementation of the requirements um, could change. So Christy, does that help? That is the major difference between rules and requirements. Does that put it? Okay, I see a thumbs up. Thumbs up is great. I'm glad. Okay, so that is that. Let's go to the next slide. What are the characteristics of a good business rule? So again, if you remember, because we are talking about business rule analysis, so I will keep reiterating all of the characteristics. I have already mentioned them at different points, like while I've been giving this training. So the first thing, clear and atomic, non-negotiable. Like I said, it has to be unambiguous, it has to be it has to be plain. So one of the pitfalls that some BAs tend to fall into is that they try to lump two rules within one. It kind of you're trying to merge two different ideas um, or policies inside one rule, and the chances like once you start doing that, you're eventually going to run into problems because you might run into a situation where only one of those rules might apply to that particular situation. And now it's like, oh, but I have two in here. So the very first thing you need to do is to make sure that your rules are clear and atomic. Atomic in the sense that it's like you have drilled down to the very core of the issue, and like there's no you cannot like go any lower. That way, it's like once you have your role, this is not vague. It leaves zero room for multiple translations. It can only be interpreted in one way. That is what this clear and atomic is just basically saying about. So okay, let's use the example as we go through each one of the characteristics. So to your right there, you can see here is a poor example. So large claims need approval. Like, what is that? I used this example earlier. I already see like two pitfall areas, two areas that have issues. One is the use of large, and then the second one need approval. What does large? Who defines what large is? Anybody can, it's subjective. You have not spelled out anything. So that is in coming to this rule of it being clear and atomic. This rule here is neither clear nor is it atomic because it opens up too many potential interpretations. So that is already wrong. So you can see it's too vague. What counts as large? And also the second thing is who is the person saying needs approval? Okay, but by whom? Who? The manager, the SME, another stakeholder? Like who needs to give the approval? So that's why this is a very poor example. So it does not meet the criteria of being clear and atomic. How to write it will be this. So here we can see claims exceeding $10,000 require approval from a claims manager before processing. So now you have clearly spelled out the amount and also this approval, who needs to give it before it can proceed. So that is how your business rule should be. So in this regard here, you can see that it is clear, it is atomic, it does not leave any room for multiple interpretations, it is unambiguous, it is perfect. So the second characteristic that you look out for when you're writing your business rules is testable. Are you able to test this rule? You need to verify whether it has been satisfied or violated. If your rule is something that cannot be measured or like assessed, then how do you know that it is done? Like I guess we can want to say here, like, what's your definition of done, right? Like, how do you know um, you have implemented correctly if you cannot test it? If it's not testable, it means you need to rewrite it. It's not good enough. And we use our example here, large claims need approval. What is that? How do we test it? Like it doesn't make any sense. So well, when we come to the proper example here, Claims exceeding 10,000 needs approval, blah, 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 from claims manager. So very testable. When you implement this, the QA team, they go in, they would try, claiming an amount more than 10,000, and they would see if indeed it prompts them, like, like an approval is needed. Is it going to go through or is it not going to go through? So you need to be able to validate your role through testing. So that's what we mean by it has to be testable. And lastly, it has to be traceable and consistent. So, like I mentioned earlier, rules have to link to their sources and not contradict each other or another rule that's already in place. So, um, you have to now check, you remember the sources of the business rules. So whatever rule you're making you have to be able to trace it back to a source. Because sometimes some people may just come up with a rule that seems to fit a particular scenario, like, but it didn't come from the business. It doesn't make any sense, but in that moment they kind of like wrote it down, but like there's no owner, there's no reasoning or logic behind it, and it's untraceable. So once you cannot trace your role to the business, then you know that, okay, I have to go back to the drawing board. This is not going to work. So that's those are the characteristics of good business rules. Any questions? Put your hands up if you do. Okay. Um, Next, just this is just kind of like just to have like a visual depiction of the life cycle of the business rules analysis. So it's just for you to know, like, okay, these are the things you need to do to know that, okay, you're kind of like you've completed this particular technique, right? You've used it well, and you have you have done it the right way, and you have like your output is something that you can use. So the first we identify, so from all the sources that we have highlighted earlier. Secondly, we'll check clarity, consistency, and also if there are any conflicts with existing rules. So that's what the analyze part goes into. Thirdly, specify. So this is about documenting. So you've come up with all these rules now. How do you document? We're going to see in I think the next couple of slides how we document, specify these rules. So you have to document in a structured format, in a format that can be understandable to your stakeholders. So you have to be able to present it in a form that is readable, not just to you, but to any kind of audience that looks at it. It's easy to read and easy to understand at a glance. Then fourthly, you validate with the business owner. So I mentioned earlier as well, always have to go back and confirm that what you have captured is indeed what was the intent from the business. And then lastly, approval. So governance, review, and sign off from whichever leadership is in charge of the business rules or like managing that particular aspect of the business. Excuse me. So business rules require ongoing governance. So that's another thing that you should keep in mind as a BA. When you come up with your business rules, it's not a one and done. Thank you very much. We're done. That is it. No, business rules they require ongoing governance. So beyond just the initial documentation, every phase that produces an output is going to fit into something else, right? So at every point in time, you have to like keep going back and reviewing to make sure that the roles are still as is, they are implemented the way you intended, and they are justifying or fulfilling the original intent of the business. And also to ensure that um, any new changes to like legal regulations is being affected, like those changes are applied, and also that new rules that come in do not contradict with already existing rules. So it's kind of like a continuous process, which is why I was saying I spoke about ownership, because once a rule does not have an owner, the tendency is that that rule is going to just become stale, and it's kind of like a slippery slope. Once you have stale rules that no one is managing, chances are it's going to lead to issues in the future. So, so how do we elicit business rules? I'm sure all of us here are pretty familiar with all the elicitation techniques, the tools that we use to elicit, like when you do your knowledge area for elicitation. It's similar. We adopt similar techniques here, or like some of the tools that we use to elicit these business rules from whatever sources it is that we are dealing with. So what are these te elicitation techniques that we can employ for our business rules? Of course, interviews is very invaluable. One-on-one sessions with the SMEs and decision makers. It's a self-explanatory workshops. So you have collaborative group sessions to surface and align rules. Sometimes, depending on the industry, depending on the type of business, you need to actually have a collaborative session where you can bounce ideas off. Because sometimes you might go over some things, pull out some rules or stuff that you feel is the rule and should be made one of the rules for the business. However, depending on like from conversations, you might find out that, oh, maybe you overlooked something, or maybe you overestimated a particular element within that particular rule you were coming up with. So these workshops help, and just kind of like you're brainstorming, you're pulling out different things, and it helps generally to elicit the best possible business rules that will help govern the business and um, basically the intent of the business is realized from those sessions. So very important workshops. Of course, observation and document analysis. Like I said, those, if you remember from the sources we had internal, you're reviewing all the company documents, all of the resources available within the company, existing policies, the procedures, all the process rules can be extracted from. Yeah, so those are the three major techniques you can employ to elicit your business rules. So what kind of questions, there are a couple of questions you can ask that kind of like helps bring these rules like to the surface. It helps in your during your interview or workshops. Um, so we have like what decisions are made in this process. Like while you're reviewing, you can be asking these kinds of questions. What policies or guidelines apply here? What are the exceptions? Sometimes there are edge cases, and if you're trying to build a business rule, you have to be aware of potential edge cases, potential cases where exceptions might need to be included. And then also, of course, you'll be asking what regulations govern the particular area that your business is situated. Is it a state role? Is it a industry role of regulation? What are the regulations that govern the business that you're handling? So usually people find that asking what happens when blah, blah, blah often helps to reveal hidden rules that may not be initially captured within formal documentation. So all in all, if there's anything you take away from this, don't be shy to ask questions. When you're trying to elicit business rules, there's no question that is too atomic or like too silly or stupid or dumb or whatever. It's important because that's the only way you can make sure that you cover all your bases and you don't overlook anything. So ask questions. Questions all the time. Okay. Now we go into documenting these rules. So now we have identified the rules, we have gotten from our sources. So now how do we document these rules? The first one, we have a rule catalog, right? So this is like a centralized register of rules with metadata such as ID, owner, source. So this they don't say catalog, it makes it sound so fancy. Could just be something as simple as a Google sheet or an Excel sheet. You have that and you document all the rules you come up with, assign like, did they probably include like, when you got it from, who the source, like where did you get it from, who was the person that gave it to you, and depending on the kind of industry, you might even want to go granular, like, okay, the meeting time, the session, what session exactly did this happen? And then you have an owner who collected it and who's responsible for managing that. Because most often, like in large organizations especially, um, because there's so many people, it ends up being one of those situations where everybody thought like somebody was going to do it and then nobody ends up doing it kind of situation. So it's very important that every role has an owner so that that person is who you go to when you have like you request change, or that person is also responsible for ensuring that it's kept up to date, right? It's being maintained appropriately. So that's one format, a role catalog. A second way is in a structured sentence. So, like we said, understanding the if then else formats, it helps specifically if you want to make sure that it's clear and testable, because then you're prescribing scenarios and situations exactly as they should be, and that way you're very sure that you're going to be able to test that particular expression that you have come up with. So making structured statements is a very good way of documenting the business rules. So an example here, you can see like if customer balance is greater than 60 days overdue, then we deny credit purchases, or else we allow credit purchases. So it leaves no room for ambiguity. This is an example of a structured rule. Like this is how you're going to capture it and like save it and document it, keep it in the archive for like future references. A third way of documenting another format is decision trees. So this is like visual for visual expression. So it shows like the visual branching logic. However, decision trees only work, or rather work best for sequential decisions. So if you have a situation where, okay, this happens, yes, no, okay, if it's no, you did this. If it's yes, okay, there's another tree, kind of like go. And then if no, like, so it has to be sequential. It has to like follow, there has to be a flow for the tree to make sense, because otherwise, if you have like a complex situation, your tree is gonna have so many branches, and then you're kind of like defeating the purpose of your visual expression, which was to make it easy to understand, right? Then we have decision tables. So contrary to the trees, the decision tables are perfect for documenting um, situations where you have multiple conditions. So decision tables are used for expressing complex logic. So if there are, as opposed to the trees where it's just like, okay, it said yes, no, and it can only be one of the two, right? You're kind of like you're flowing. The decision tables, you can have a combination of different types. Anyways, I have an example in the next slide, so kind of like you'll be able to see a little bit better. It would help to understand. But all you can take away from this is just that structured statements help map directly to test cases and system logic. Because as you can see from this sentence here, it directly maps to a test case. And that way, like for your QA and even your personal validation, it's very easy to understand. So they make them valuable for both the BAs and the developers, and of course the QAs, because like, yeah, it's otherwise their jobs become a nightmare. Okay, so here, this is an example. You can get to see a decision tree at a glance, right? So, still towing the thread of the example we've been using of the commerce sites not allowing any transactions when a client has uh anything overdue for more than 60 days, right? So let's look at how the tree would be. You have a new transaction. You have a new transaction. It's either also the first gate. So this is our gate one. And we're saying, is it overdue for more than 60 days? You have two options. Is it no? So if it's no, it means automatic approval. If you now come this way, yes, that's a second gate now that we have to test. They now ask, okay, is it a VIP customer? Because like most organizations kind of have this kind of setup. There are certain exceptions for preferred customers. Customers who at least they've been loyal. So they have even defining who a loyal customer is, like that's another like layer of business rule that can be applied, right? You say, okay, if someone has been with us for like 4 years, depending, or maybe they've like done a certain number of transactions or something like that, right? So, anyways, just kind of giving an idea of how the business rules can be layered and like almost every part kind of like has a rule governing it and you kind of like have to be able to map each of these things separately. But for the purpose of this and with this example, we're focusing on this new transaction and the idea is for the overdue more than 60 days, how what do you do? So this is the flow then. So if from the first gate we see that, oh, it's overdue for 60 days, um, we now ask, is it a VIP customer? If they say no, automatically you reject because it means there's no, we don't have to give you any special treatment because like you're not VIP. We're like, yeah, we don't owe you anything. However, so if the answer is yes, then there's a third gate, there's a manager review. So from that manager's review, the manager can then, based on their discretion, decide to either reject or approve, right? And a lot of things like I don't even with them like what can I use now? Like visa applications, right? They also have like their business rules that they have it mapped out, right? On a like they have some form of decision tree, I would assume. And they're gating like, okay, has this person traveled before? Yes, no, okay. Do they come back after traveling? Like, yes, no, will they stay more than 2 weeks? Kind of stuff like that. So these kind of decision trees like help the actor to be able to kind of like follow a sequential flow. You kind of like know exactly what you need to do in a specific scenario. So this is kind of like what's the decision tree. This is a very simple, basic decision tree. There are decision trees that can go like really large depending on how um depending on the logic, depending on the industry and what exactly they're trying to, what the end goal is. So your tree can go as long as is needed, but the major thing is that you have to ensure that it is sequential. That's when you use a tree. So here, for the case, if it was a VIP customer, then you said, okay, we had rejected, and then yes, manager reviews, approve or reject. So when do you use the decision tree? So like I said, when the logic follows a clear sequential path, very important. If the logic is not sequential, don't even bother. You're just going to end up in some kind of twisted, uh, like some kind of twisted spine tree, and it's not going to make sense to anyone. Um, Also, you use it when the conditions are evaluated one at a time. So it's like, okay, is this in place? Yes, no, you move on. What about this? Yes, no. So it's each step on its own. You're not combining anything. And then also you use this when your stakeholders need an easy to read visual. So that's why I said the more complex it is, then you are not delivering, like you're not giving them what they want. You have to know your audience, know your stakeholders and the way they would prefer to consume the information. But as a general rule of thumb, like making any artifact you're producing to easy to read is always a win for whatever kind of audience. So 3 characteristics you should know for your the benefits rather for your decision tree is that it's readable. So even for intuitive or non-technical stakeholders, it should be completely understandable at a glance. If I had just shown you guys this, like I'm pretty sure like anyone could have been able to understand what was intended, right? Okay, let me show of hand how many people understood the tree even before I explained it. Just give it thumbs up. I think there's like a react thing on is there. Um no one could understand the tree without my explanation. Anyone?
More like we didn't really focus on the tree and we just flowed with the explanation.
Okay, you're just there.
But
Okay.
I really
But looking at
understand it, like,
so after the explanation now, as you're looking at it, like, is
I
it
mean, I mean, even without the explanation, it is easy to understand.
exactly,
I'll just say
exactly.
that.
Exactly. So thank you. That is exactly what I was after. Like that is what the decision tree is supposed to do. It's like without any context, without any prior knowledge, you look at a tree and automatically you can understand. So that's why it has to be readable for both intuitive and non-technical stakeholders. And then it's traceable. So every decision is traceable to an outcome. So we can see, okay, there's yes, no, and it's moved because the outcomes is either going to be an approve or a reject. So every path has to map to an outcome. So that's another benefit for this. And then it's also a good tool to use for discussion. So in the workshop I spoke about earlier, where I said you can use it for like discussing your business rules at the start, because like even I do this a lot at work, where we're trying to like create a flow. They had like a new system and we're trying to like create a flow for like users who are not already on our platform. And we wanted to like funnel them in from like social media, like, okay, how do they get into our platform since it's like an invite only thing, right? So there are so many gaps or so many decisions that had to be made for, okay, if they come from here, like, okay, what do we do? How do we send them? So when you kind of like start mapping it out on your decision tree and seeing all the flows, it's very, very, very easy for you to highlight the gaps and see exactly where you need to implement a solution. So it's a really, really good tool. Okay. And then we have decision tables. So decision table, like I said, the difference was the trees is for when your logic is sequential. Now for the table is like if the logic is not sequential. So with this example, it's not as complex, but I'm using this one just so you have an idea of how you can group two factors together and kind of come to a decision. So the conditions, you could have like n number of conditions here, and you can have like n number of rows. It just keeps going, but because it's in a tabular manner, each condition you can group them. So you can say, okay, yes, you're overdue 60 days. No, it's not a VIP customer. Automatically okay, it's reject. There's like, okay, no, it's the person is not overdue and is a VIP customer, you can approve, right? If once you list out all the conditions and have like all your rules like laid out in a tabular form, it's easy for you to just at a glance also be able to see what the outcome will be. But the good thing about the tables is that it can handle complex logic, whereas the tree cannot handle complex logic. So if there's anything you need to take out of that, that's just it. So it handles complexity, um, helps eliminate ambiguity as every combination maps exactly to one outcome, and it's also excellent for testing. So QAs tend to really love the tables because it's already kind of like does their work for them. So because they can easily it's so easy to test. Like anybody looking at this knows exactly what they need to do in order to test and validate a particular scenario. So that's
It
why
just
like
feels like exercise. If the train, go and sit, don't worry.
okay. Um, Next we have our business rules governance. So now we have documented, we've elicited, we've documented, we understand what the rules are. Now, how do we ensure that the rules are being governed properly? So here you can see core governance activities, ownership. I've been hammering on ownership because each role has a named business owner that's accountable for its accuracy. So ownership. Second is version control. Rules are versioned to track and they are versions, so changes can be tracked and auditable. So a lot of times your rules might change, right? So that's why you see it's not even just with rules, like even with release notes or like product release is something very obvious. You would always see like, oh, this is version 1 or like version 1.2, you have 1.3, some go like the idea is that every time there's a change, you have to keep it. So instead of just some people like want to just it might be tempting and so easy to just want to like, cancel. You're like, okay, you know what, I'm going to cancel this part. Let me just edit it and put it in the same document. But then that's um, that is a slippery slope because now you cannot trace back to a time when the rules were implemented in a different way. And so there might be an issue that requires you recalling a particular version because you want to know, okay, what was implemented in that time. Even for legal purposes, you need to know, you might have someone come to you and say, oh, when I did this, this was not the policy, was not the rule, because now they are working based on whatever new rule is there. But when you have your versions, you can date it back and be like, oh no, at this time, on this day, these were the rules that were in place, and this is why you have the result that you have. So version control is very important. Approval process, again, changes require formal sign-off before any changes can be made. And rule repository. So there's a central catalog that stores all the active rules with its metadata. So any information pertaining to how that rule was generated is stored within that. So that's the catalog that we spoke about early in our documentation. And then lastly, compliance reviews. So there are periodic audits to confirm that the rules remain correct and are aligned. So that's why we said business rules governance is not a one-off activity, it's an ongoing periodic activity that happens over time just to ensure that the roles remain active, the roles remain relevant, and just to confirm and be sure that the roles are indeed aligned to the business intent. So just why does governance matter? So this is a summary of everything I've been saying. Business rules change frequently due to regulatory updates, market shifts, and internal policy revisions. Without governance, outdated or conflicting rules create compliance risk and operational inconsistency. So ungoverned rules are among the most common causes of silent process failures in large organizations. Yes, I can attest to this. It's very, because once a role, once it's not governed, it's a slippery slope. Everyone just kind of like, it becomes a case of a headless chicken, just trying to like find out what happened, where did it go wrong. So ensuring that every role has an owner is very important. Um, okay, so nice. This is the case study I mentioned. This is just for you to do in your own, just give you an idea of what you should do. So it's for a retail credit approval, right? So is it gonna seal these customers overdue? Because one of like it's straightforward and you should be able to help you kind of like you think and brainstorm of other ways. So this is the policy that customers with more than 60 days cannot receive new credit. So what you should do, like your activities, identify the conditions, then on yourself, like define the decisions and outcome. Just come up with whatever. Um, then build a decision table, like map out the different combinations you can come up with, and then create your supporting requirements, like how you're going to translate this into a system level functional requirements. So this is just something you can just do like in your spare time, just so like this technique kind of like gets solidified in your brain. And then while you're there, like, maybe if you guys, I don't know how you do your, if you have like side study sessions, you can then discuss like, what are the exceptions that could exist, like consider your VIP customers like payment plans or like what's like in the case where we're saying, okay, you're going to review, like what are the kind of extenuating circumstances that would have you consider like, okay, let's help our VIP customers. So all of those different potential outcomes or like potential hurdles that could be while you're kind of trying to build out the business rule, it would help if you just kind of take a minute when you can at a later time to go over and just try to build this out yourself and see if you're capable. And yeah, it would help solidify the technique in your mind. Okay. Oh, what is this? What happened there? Sorry. We're almost done. Okay. Mm. Okay. All right, so common challenges in business roles. So what are the common things you might find yourself like falling into? I've also mentioned some of it like as I've been speaking, but this kind of just documents everything at a glance. So conflicting roles. So you may have two roles that contradict themselves, have duplicate roles. You don't want to have the same constraint expressed in two different locations. So you have to be mindful of that. Hidden assumptions. So sometimes some rules are only known just to the staff or like people who work there, but like it was never documented. So that's where the whole me saying, oh, you need to ask questions because it unearths some of these hidden assumptions that we can easily fall prey to. Um, ensure that it's traceable. So a lot of times actually people have roles that are not that lack traceability. So any role with no link to a source or owner or related requirements is it's a red flag. And then lastly, regulatory changes. So any external mandates that invalidates your existing roles without warning. So you have to and this is why the periodic auditing is important, and also having ownership because it helps to mitigate this. So there are also some of the strategies right here. Central rule repository. So having one source of truth, everybody refers to that. That way, the information that goes out is consistent and is central. There's one place you can track it. Having the regular reviews, like I just mentioned, like the periodic audits, as well as stakeholder validation. Under no circumstance should you assume that's, oh yes, I'm always right, so like whatever it is, it's as in this is what the business should want. Like never assume, always confirm and validate from the business to ensure that you have captured their intent the way they intended it. So I guess a summary for this would just be like a role that no one owns is a role that no one maintains. So always maintain and always assign ownership. If there's anything to take away from there, that is that. Um, there are a couple of tips this would help. Like for those, I know we have a couple of people that are trying to take the CBAP. So just a couple of tips just to keep at the back of your mind is know the technique purpose. What is the purpose of the business rule analysis? Like why do we do it? Once you understand that and it's clear in your mind, you're able to easily map and answer questions just because you understand the fundamental of a particular technique. So be clear on what the business rules analysis is designed to achieve within Babok. Um, understand when each documentation approach is most effective and its limitations. So we mentioned the tree, we mentioned the table, understand its use and where it would where it would have limitations and where you can like draw the line. Um, the difference between the tables and the trees, you understand that the tables are good to handle multiple condition combinations, and then trees are better for sequential logic. So you just think, okay, sequential, gonna be a tree. Anything more complex or complicated, a table is better to organize those thoughts. And then lastly, understanding the roles, the relationship between roles and requirements. How are roles different from requirements? How do they support each other? How do they and how do you use your roles to define your requirements? So the rules, remember the rules constrain behavior while requirements define system capability. So they're always related. Like I said, it's like a yin-yang situation. However, they're related, but they are two different things. So try not to confuse them. So one of the common exam themes you would see, they always ask, but not always, but sometimes, like which technique best documents complex business logic with multiple condition combinations. So whenever you just see a complex logic and multiple combinations, your mind should automatically go to a decision table because that would be the best answer. So this is just a summary of everything that we've spoken about: rules versus requirements, your sources of rules, and table versus tree. Um, anyway, I would ask, is there anyone that would want to share? So I know Christy already, the rule versus requirements they're so straightforward. There's really nothing to it. The key differences, we've hammered on it multiple times today. The role is by the business, the requirements is the enforcement within the solution. Then our sources of roles, we had them internal, external. Internal had a couple of different sources from within the business, and then external, we had like from external forces, so legal or regulatory bodies, and that. Then table versus tree, again, we've said that, so yeah, I don't even have to go over it again. Table for complex thoughts, trees better for sequential decisions. So understanding that, again, at your spare time, just go over these knowledge check questions. It would help to solidify the information in your mind. Okay, this is just one quick practice question. Just put your answer in the chat. A business analyst must document multiple combinations of conditions and outcomes for a loan approval process. Which technique should be used? Put your answer in the chat. A, B, C, or D. Yeah, we have one answer. Anyone else? Anyone else? I'll wait for 3 more responses. Hopefully. We have a lot of bees in the house. Okay, quota has been reached. Okay, so yes, B is the answer. I'm happy to know that at least, if anything, one thing has stuck. Um, uh, that everybody knows that once you're dealing with a complex situation, complex logic, a decision table is the best way to organize that thought. So I'm very happy with that. If nothing else, that makes me very happy. So yeah, this is the ultimate summary for everything we've done. In the beginning, I mentioned the things that you should learn. This is just a summary of the things that at the end of this session you should know. So you take to know that rules govern business behavior. Rules are not requirements. Decision tables are a Babok cornerstone. So you need to like master the artifact and understand that it handles complex logic, which I believe from the responses, everyone in this class understands that. Someone's asking, can a business rule become a requirement or should they always remain separate? Oh no, they're separate. They're two different things. Like the business rule is started on, it's independent of the requirements. The requirements is solution based, related but different. So the business rule is what would impact or what would help define what your requirements will be, but they should always be separate because the rule is going to always be very definitive statement based. The rule does not contain any solution. It's just telling you this is what I want. Does that answer your question, Ahmed? But yeah, they should be always kept separate, two different artifacts. I hope that answers your question, Ahmed. But if not, let me know. And then lastly, governance is non-negotiable. Rules must be owned, versioned, and reviewed to remain accurate and compliant over time. So that is the end of my training. So thank you for listening. The floor is open for questions, comments, anything. Floor. Okay, floor is open. Okay. I see clapping hands. So I assume everything was good. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate taking the time to come here. For those of you that are looking to sit for the exams, I wish you good luck. There's nothing to stress about, to be honest. Like once you understand the basics and the concepts for um understand the basic concepts of the Babok itself and just a business analysis, it's really it's easy. Like it's a walk in the park. So just wish you the best. Keep reading the Bible. There are so many resources these days. Anyone you don't understand, like, can reach out, and there are always so many resources to help you. Yeah, I think that is pretty much all I have for today. Again, I'll urge you to try with the case study just to help solidify this knowledge and, so that it's actually stays with you. Um, oh yeah, I think that's it for now. So thank you again, once again, I really appreciate it. Um, yeah. Tope, are you in this class? Are you here? Or do I
Well done.
just
Well
wrap up?
done.
Okay.
Well done. Well
All right.
done, Seno. Yeah, that was a brilliant, insightful class. I think I need to come and take a refreshers class, with you.
I'm glad. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
taking
you.
our time to do this, and you really broke down the details. Really take it to the level whereby even a kindergarten will understand business rules analysis. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
we appreciate
So,
it. Sorry, I
I
see
like,
one question. Let me just answer that before you
okay.
continue. Tim Posai is asking, is business rule also the same as standard us operating SOP? No, they're different. The business rule is the business just stating like what they want, right? The standard operating procedure is more like how things should be done within the industry. It's like the SOP is usually like a series of tasks, like processes, really. It's like, okay, this, you do this, you want to do this, you go next, like steps, right? Whereas the rule is a structured statement, always a definitive statement. So I hope that helps to answer your question. They are different and should be treated as such. Okay, I hope that answers. All right, topic can continue. Thank
All
you.
right. Yeah. So thank you so much once again, Seno. We really, really appreciate you, and we hope that when we call upon you another time, you will be glad to hear our calls. So, and to everyone, who really took their time to be part of this, it's really, really um, worthwhile, I believe, from your own end. I believe you've learned a lot as well. Business rules analysis is one of the techniques, that if you pick up a Bible and you read it, it's somehow, let me put it like that, you really need someone with experience to break it down, relate it to real life situations for you to be able to capture it. And that is what Senu has just done. So I believe with this, it's added value to what you know, and all you just need to do now is to start applying it. And also for those that wants to write the exam, the session is recorded as well as the slides. I'm sure Seno will be benevolent enough to share the slides with us, right? Seno.
Yes, of course. I'm
Okay.
a free giver.
Okay.
I will share the slides. I noticed there were a couple of
Very good.
typos, so I'll just fix those and then I'll send it over.
Fix it. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Seno. I can't thank you enough.
Oh
And
no, it's my pleasure.
before we call it, we end it. So I'd like to just let everyone know. I'm sure you've seen the Save the Dates campaign. Our conference for the year is coming up. So we now have a premier flagship name for it. It's Nigeria Annual Business Analysis Conference, and it's coming up November 6th, while the AGM is the next day, November 7th. So, Seno, I'm sure you come around, you can attend them online. So that is not excluding you wherever you
Oh,
are. So
thank
if you're
you.
not in Nigeria, you can always attend. So early bird registration is going to start next week. So please be on the lookout, and um, you're able to start registering, you know, in good time. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. Sincerely appreciate you all for being
Thank
part
you.
of this. And Senyo, once again, thank you. I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. All
Appreciate
right.
it.
So bye for now, everyone. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Good night.
Have a
Yeah.
good day. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.